so excited to share my heart's passion and joy and love with all of you, and to do so with my counterpart, Brie, who I would love to introduce to you. So Brie, why don't you introduce yourself? Because you are magic and everyone needs to know who you are.
Thank you so much, Ilana. Ilana and I have the pleasure of working and co-leading trainings together, including the one coming up this weekend. And if you've been in any trainings via Zoom and digitally, you've been with us. So, hey, I am a co-lead at Brie for Change, but what I'm very proud of is that I am a former Brie for Change graduate. So if any of you are a part of it, I was where you were at that point. I also am an educator myself, and I am based in New York. So my school I'm a director of student support services in Harlem. I know it came out heavy when I say, I can't say I'm a native New Yorker, so it comes out heavy when I speak that. I went to Spelman College undergrad, and came back to New York City as a New York City teaching fellow at Hunter College, where I studied special education. So that is what I do. I am over the special education program in the English as a new language program at my school, and have begun to support many of our equity-based conversations in our building, which include anti-racism talks and supports of how to use social emotional wellness to integrate that in behavior intervention plans, and begin to support students in their own agency and advocacy using SEL strategies, which is a part of our trainings as something that we learn a lot about to support students in. And yeah, that's how I utilize, and also a yoga teacher in my own community, and making sure that I support, because I'm a member of the Bronx, even though I teach in Harlem. So it's uptown all day anyway. But yeah, I also support those in my community. And that's just a little about me and how I utilize the tools that I've learned from Brie for Change. And yeah, Ilana.
So I would love, before we dig in, to know who is in the room. So I know some of you are brand new to Breathe for Change. Others are currently in a Breathe for Change training or signed up for a future training. We have 200-hour training starting this Saturday. Raise your hand if any of you are in that one. Yay! We are so excited. And if you're interested in registering for that, we still have a few spots left, and we'll happily share more information about that at the end and put it in the chat as well. So, okay, I'm going to give you 3 more seconds to fill out your poll. I see a wide range of people in the room. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Awesome. So 50% of you are brand new to Breathe for Change. So awesome. Welcome. We are so excited to see you and meet you and be with you, and hopefully give you a taste of what Breathe for Change is all about. We got 19% of you are our loves who are in a current training with us. You know how we feel about you. So proud. And oh my God, 16% can't wait to meet you this year. Maybe this week, if you're signed up for the April training or the summer trainings. We are so excited. And grads, you are the absolute best. Thank you for doing the incredibly important and inspiring work that you're all doing in your community. So thanks for that. And in the spirit of Breathe for Change, we always start any session that we lead with a settle in. So Brie, do you want to settle everyone in?
Yeah, let's invite a little movement in our bodies before we do anything. So whatever feels good, if you want to just move the wrist a little bit, maybe roll the neck, maybe roll the shoulders. And on your next inhale, if you can allow the arms to make a nice sunrise around you. I have long arms, so you probably can't see it in the frame. And as the exhale, maybe bring a prayer to the heart. Yeah, let's do 2 really full ones just like that. Find that breath again, some movement, bring it down on your exhale, finding a prayer or whatever feels really good with the hands. On your next inhale, do that one more time, circle around your body. And on this time, maybe turn to your right side or left side. Just do a little twist with your spine. It's okay if you're not going my direction or if I'm not mirrored. Just do a nice twist from the center Take a breath here and exhale. And as you exhale, you can unravel. Let's do another one so that we could go, as you know, if you've been in trainings and you go one side, you got to go to the other, right? Inhale that up, and on your exhale, if you didn't go to your left, right, go to the other left, right. And find that twist from your center at your belly button, maybe a little bit above that, a nice tall spine. Take a full breath here. Exhale. One more deep inhale, filling the chest. And exhale, coming back center. Perhaps a hand finds the heart and one on the belly. And let's shift into our next part with 3 collective breaths. Take an inhale for the moment that we are coming from, and exhale to let go of that moment. Take another full breath, taking your time for the moment that we are in, and allow the exhale to be as gentle and as long as that inhale was. And now another inhale to invite in the moment that we are moving into. And as you exhale, allow your body, your mind, and you to arrive in this moment. And when you feel complete, perhaps you blink the eyes open if they were closed, wiggle the fingers, release your heart, and come back to this space. Thank you for joining me in that practice. Ilana.
Awesome. Thanks, Brie. So let's dive in. So today our webinar is all about how to teach SEL through an equity lens in schools. So what our intentions are for you, first and foremost, is that you personally enhance your well-being through experiencing some transformative wellness and SEL practices for yourself. So at Breathe for Change, our SEL curriculum, which many of you know who've been in trainings with us, we tag on the F to SEL. It spells self, because we believe it's so critically important for us as educators, as leaders, to embody the practices that we would like to teach and instill in our students. And so a reminder that you are number one, your well-being matters so much, and that when we are actually embodying these equity-oriented practices, then it's so much more likely that we're going to have the kind of impact that we truly want. So that's our number one outcome. Brie, you want to hit the second one?
Yes, our second outcome is understand the distinction between deficit thinking and asset-based approach and gain tools to teach through an equity lens. I will dive a little bit more into this later, but it's really about understanding that everyone has unique strengths that we can all begin to support throughout their learning. And I will definitely dive into that a lot more. But Ilana, why don't you take them into outcome 3?
Awesome. So last but not least, you will walk away understanding very, very specific SEL strategies that you can use in your teaching. And all of them will be through an equity lens. So we're really going to focus on that equity piece throughout this webinar so that each and every one of you feel confident integrating these practices to make a difference in your students' lives. All right. So set the context, my Brie.
No worries. So before we get a little bit deeper into the context, I would like to explain that oftentimes the words equity and equality become conflated and mixed. And I would just like to support us in our understanding. It's not that either is wrong, right? But we try to lean in the direction of equity. And this is why. Equality means that everyone gets the same thing, right? And I think about the students that I have in classrooms, and I used to have one student that loved to read, right? And whenever she was rewarded, she wanted more reading time. Could you imagine if that's how I treated all of my students and rewarded them with more reading time just because, like, we're all just taking third? It's not the same. It doesn't feel the same to them, right? It feels, for many of my students, the complete opposite of that, right? So what that means is that you meet your students with who they are and what they need, or not even what they need. What are they really good at? And how can we begin to strengthen that muscle or use that strength muscle, right? And begin to build on that so that they can become stronger in all areas, right? So if you have really strong legs, you can use that to help you lift up the weight so that you can begin to have really strong arms and move from there. And how do we build upon that? And one of our main tools is the breath. And the breath is something that we all have, right? And we'll get a little more into that later. But Ilana, do you want to add anything else?
I would just say that some of the practices that we are going to be teaching you today are aimed to really, really support each and every student individually where they are, not to make them all be the same, because that doesn't honor who they are. All of us are uniquely different, which is beautiful. So how can we draw on, like Brie said, the gifts, the talents, and the unique assets that they bring? And so as we're moving through some breathing techniques, some intention setting, some loving kindness meditations, and other SEL practices that you may not think connects to equity, we're going to help you bridge that gap by understanding, how does this actually foster equity and inclusion in the context of my classroom and school? So before we get into the practices, both Brie and I felt like it would be really, really helpful to share the distinction between deficit-based thinking and an assets-based approach, with the intention of us all taking on that assets-based approach. So Brie, do you want to dig into deficit thinking?
Yeah. There are many critiques that describe social emotional learning as just another form of control or discipline. So, unless we intentionally bring awareness to the lens through which we are approaching and integrating social emotional learning into our instruction, and check what biases and deficit based thinking we will bringing to our teaching, we can actually cause more harm. So let's get a little bit into what deficit based thinking is. It is needs driven. It really focuses on what does this person need and plugging in holes. It's also problems focused, which means that we're centering something as a problem and then focusing on it. It's also externally focused, meaning that the things that whatever needs to help this situation has to come from outside, that there's a lack from within. And it really centers around the idea of a fixed mindset. So, how can we fix this problem? What is missing that we need to find outside the community, and that this is the problem that exists and it always will? There's no changing it. It's also very much so individual focused. So, seeing the situation or an individual as unfortunate rather than an basically approaching and acknowledging the systemic unjustness or the different problems outside that exist to create these circumstances that might exist within. That is why we lean into an assets-based approach, which is strengths-driven. We understand that all have strengths and we can begin to build upon those different strengths. It also looks at opportunities. So instead of seeing things as problems, this is an opportunity for growth. This is an opportunity to learn more. It's also internally focused, understanding that all of us, each of us have a set of tools that we can utilize and that we can call upon at different moments and begin to build upon that. It's also collaborative. So opposed to the idea of doing something to a student or for a student, you collaborate with them and work with the student or whoever you are teaching. And it is growth mindset oriented. So what is present that we can build upon, that we all have things that we need to learn and that we are always growing and beginning to learn more. And it's also systems focused. It's recognizing an unjust situation and taking action against that. So if we begin to incorporate those mindsets and understand that this community, and not incorporating that this community needs fixing or that these members need fixing, then we begin to move into the asset-based approach.
Amazing. So we now are going to walk you through several different SEL practices and strategies that will first practice with you so you can experience them and embody them in your own body, and then gain the confidence to be able to facilitate these in your own classrooms and in your communities, no matter what context you're teaching in. Now, all of these, we are going to take an assets-based approach. And again, like I mentioned, we'll consider how do we use an equity lens when we're talking about these different practices. So Brie, will you begin with intention setting?
Yes. So we are really going to highlight throughout this time what equity practices and how this can emphasize equity. So intention setting is an opportunity to co-create the learning with whomever is in your classroom, who are your students, who is in front of you. Understanding that each student will have their own intention, right, of what they need to be successful, and they get to determine what feels great to them and based off of where they are at that day, right? And if you think about your own intention practice, right, your intention on Monday might not feel the same as your intention on Friday. And each person gets to check in with where they are at in that moment and set the intention from there. And co-creating that learning is, instead of saying, this is your intention for this class, this is how you will feel in this class, you're not putting that on the person. You are allowing them to build and begin to assess where they are at, where they would like to go, and navigate that journey on themselves. And you can facilitate that.
Beautiful. So I am going to guide you through a practice that you can differentiate and modify for use in your own context. But given that we're all here today with an intention, everyone arrived. If you arrived somewhere, you've got an intention for being there, hopefully, or maybe the intention is that I should remove myself from this experience, right? So one thing I want to say when we're talking about intention setting, it's different than goal setting. And I think it's really important, especially as educators, that we understand that distinction. So goal setting is usually about the destination. I want to get an A on that test, or I want to run a marathon. And intention setting is, how do I want to show up in any given moment along that path towards reaching a goal or towards whatever it is that I have set out for myself. So I might have an intention for how I want to show up with all of you right now. I might have an intention for how I want to be. It's like the being versus the doing. I want to be kind. I want to be inspiring today. I want to be thoughtful. That is my intention. Whereas I want to do something. I want to cross that finish line. I want to get that A. That's about doing. So intentions are about being. And as Brie had mentioned, this is an amazing practice to do ongoingly with our students because it gives them agency and choice in determining, how do I want to show up right now to get the most out of my experience, no matter what that experience is, right? So y'all ready to set some intentions with me? All right, so I invite you to find a comfortable seated position. And then ground down through your sits bones, lengthen through your spine. Maybe relax your shoulders down your back to open through your heart, finding that comfortable seat. And I invite you to bring one hand to your heart and the other over that hand and connect to your breath, observing the rise and the fall of each inhale and each exhale. And as you continue to feel the rhythm of your heart beating beneath your palm and your breath moving in and out, up and down, I invite you to just take a moment to consider, what is your intention for how you want to show up during our precious time that we all have together today? So what is it that you need? What energy do you want to call in so that you can get the most out of this experience and even more? So maybe your intention is to be present or playful or compassionate with yourself. Maybe it's to find that sense of inner peace purpose, connection. So maybe you even land on one word or two words that represent your intention, that can serve as your anchor throughout our time together, especially in those moments when you might find your mind wandering off to places that are not here. And so breathe that intention into your heart. Exhale, let it go. Again, breathing that intention into your entire body. Exhale, share it out. Again, breathing your intention in. Exhale, release. Now rub that intention into your heart. Feel yourself living into it. And then whenever you're ready, if it feels comfortable, you can open your eyes if they were closed. And I invite you to put your intention, that word or that two words that represent your intention, into the chat so we can see what is in the space. Open and present, presence, be open, open. Oh, we got a lot of openness, calm, focus, understanding, compassion, finding inspiration, playful, confident, joy, gratitude, open-mindedness, curiosity, inner peace, learner. Love it. So, so, so beautiful. And you can just feel the power of intention setting, right? It's not about, I want to do this by the end. It's like in each moment, with each breath, I want to be focused. I'm breathing in calm. If I'm feeling super anxious, how can I welcome that in? Like bring myself back to my center and my purpose here. And so when you do this intention setting with your students, and you can, I mean, I did this with my pre-K kids. Brie does it with her middle schoolers. You could do it with the elementary school kids, the high school kids, the elderly, people in college, adults, anyone that this is so relevant to anyone. With the little ones, I sometimes call the practice hopes and dreams, because intentions can be a big vocabulary word for them, which I will teach them about, but I'll use hopes and dreams to sort of be the framework that they can understand. But you can do it just the way we did, like a guided meditation where you have them connect to their breath for a few moments and then set an intention. I love, love, love inviting in having them hone in on one word, max two words, so that they can have that anchor that represents something to them. With the little ones, you'll often find there's a little less variety in the vocabulary that they use, like happy, fun, right? They're not going to say necessarily groundedness or purposeful, but they will use words that represent them. Now, as you get older, this is a great opportunity to engage in a conversation with them about the types of intentions, and it builds their emotional vocabulary when we invite them to share. That's a huge, huge, I would say, benefit of the practice. It's so important to having our students build not just self-awareness. This is my intention. I know this for myself and I have this anchor, but social awareness. I know that in my community, this is what everybody wants, or what individuals across my community want. How do we create the sacred container in this learning space to foster an environment that works for everybody? Because we all have different intentions and they're all important. That's where the equity piece comes in, is we are holding space, not for some of these intentions to be fulfilled. How do we create a safe container or a brave container, I should say, where all of these intentions can be held and honored and represented? So Brie, is there anything the last thing I'll say, I did a guided meditation. You could have them journal. You can say, write your intention in your journal. They can create an intentions journal. You can have them share with a partner their intentions. You can have them in small groups, or you can have them go around their circle. And if I was in person, I would probably have everyone say that one word. It takes a couple minutes max to go through that entire process, because it's very bottom lined and centered and focused. And that's the power of this practice. So Brie, anything you would add?
Yeah, Chrissy, actually, shout out to Chrissy for dropping it in the chat. You can also have them draw. Something else you can do for students that might need more support, you can choose colors. There's a mood meter as well that has different colors that are attached to it. Blue meaning a color, you can Google it in those colors. So if they need more support with their expressive verbal communication, colors might be things that you can correlate with, and they can choose colors and yeah, mood meters. They can color those and begin to express in that way. So all have access to different feelings that are within their bodies. It is also a way. I told you I have to make another plug for ENL. It's another great time to teach kids different words and have all of your students input to build on the strengths that, like, in my language, this is how I say this feeling. In my language, this is how I say this feeling. So there's different ways that we can begin to include all of our students to express where they are at, and yeah, have an equitable share, because we all have feelings. We all are able to have an expression of some sort.
Beautiful. And I see an amazing question in the chat. What's the difference with stating affirmations and setting intentions? So setting an intention is like, my intention is to be kind or to be thoughtful. That's like what I am striving towards, right? Affirmation would be like, I am kind. I am present. I am powerful. I am strong. And so you can build on your intentions the intentions that your students set by having them do affirmations based on that intention. Because what that does is it shifts our mindset from this is what I want to be to this is who I am. And that is a powerful way to shift what we think is possible for ourselves. So such a beautiful activity that you can layer on is to say, okay, now let's create some affirmations. Now, writing, I am beautiful. I am smart. I can do this. On top of that, intentions is another way to take this. And I love that you brought that up, Julie. So thank you. All right. So as Brie mentioned in the beginning, so much of the foundation of not only what we do at Breathe for Change, but of what connects every single one of us is our breath. And so there is so much power in teaching different forms of breathing techniques. And we are going to specifically focus on how do we teach breath work in not only a developmentally appropriate way, but in a way that does ensure equity in our teaching. So Brie, will you set the context?
100%. Breath awareness. What I really love about breath awareness, breath awareness is one of my favorite things to share with students, because the breath is such a powerful tool that is consistently with all of us, right? So with that being said, I think many of us have experienced that our breath changes in different activities, right? If we're running up the stairs and we're late for work, or if these different things are happening, our breath tends to be the tool that escapes us first. So with that being said, it is also the tool that escapes many of our students first, but due to they're developmentally not necessarily aware of their breath. In fact, many of my middle schoolers will drop their jackets off their backs and not even notice it. So for me to ask them to be aware of their breath is like a completely distant thing for them. It's not developmentally appropriate. But what I can do is facilitate that self-reflection and that self-connection for them so that they can tap into themselves and know where their breath is at. And that is a wonderful thing to give them that tool of, so that they can end up knowing where they're at throughout the day. So breath awareness tends to be integrated in different parts, right? So we might ask you to tap in with your breath before an activity, right? So like maybe before PE, where's your breath at right now, right? And then they go running, and then where are they at after that? Or it could be after, maybe before a test, where are they at before the test, and maybe they knocked it out the park, and now they can check in with their breath again and know where they're at. We also use it as an equitable sharing transition, as you kind of seen in our space as we transition, right? So it honors the space that we came from. So if Ilana was speaking and she shared out, she might invite us in, or I might, as a facilitator, invite us all in to take 3 collective breaths so that we honor the space that Ilana just had, and that we can kind of close that off together and then move into whomever else's next space. And like put that bookend on that moment so that they feel honored in their space and there's no roll over to the next space. And it is that wonderful tool, because if our students can have that agency on when their breath is escaping them, and use that tool to tap in and say, I would like 3 collective breaths right now, or let me take 3 big breaths right now, or 5 or 10 or 8, or whatever they might need, or whatever they are requesting. That is a beautiful sense of agency. And that is what we truly want to share these social emotional practices for, right? Our students should be tapping into it and deciding when they need them, because they are aware of what's going on within them, and that they can now move into self-regulation or self-management. So the most that what we do, and that's why we tag the F on to all of our friends in SELF that are taking our trainings, know we tag that F on because we facilitate that practice of social emotional learning. We make sure that our students are within themselves, and that they can say, what this is a great feeling. This is when I feel some more constriction in my body, or something of that nature. And we support them through that and provide them tools. Ilana, you want to add anything else to that?
I would love to. So one of the ways that we can actually foster that self-awareness, that self-management, those castle competencies that all of us want to instill in our kids, is by asking, literally just asking the question after you engage in a breathing practice, how do you feel? So it's as simple as that. And you will notice that we do this all the time. I think there's like, no matter what, whether I'm teaching adults, whether I'm teaching young students, secondary students, it doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter if it's 3 collective breaths or a long breathing practice or mindful movement practice. After I'm done, I'm going to invite you to bring your hands to your heart and just notice how you feel. What that does is, one, you're like, I feel present, or I feel calm, or I feel whatever it is. I feel anxious. That might happen. You never know, right? I feel whatever it is that I feel. That is cultivating and strengthening your self-awareness skills, period. Because we go through our days so often not even taking the moment to say, you know what? Let me check in with myself. How do I really feel? And then from that pause, from that space, is when we move to that next castle competency, which is self-management. When we're aware of how we feel, it gives us agency and pause to say, okay, how am I going to manage this and regulate this right now? What choice do I want to make about the action I take next? Maybe it's continuing to take some deep breaths. Maybe it's, I just need to walk out of the room before I do something I'll regret later, and pause and come back to this conversation. Maybe it's, I need to like really be honest about something that I haven't been truthful about in this moment. And so we're fundamentally teaching these very profound SEL competencies simply by doing simple breathing techniques. So I invite you to do 3 collective breaths with me. This is literally my favorite practice in the world, because it is as simple as anything anyone could ever do. I promise that in 10 seconds, you'll feel confident teaching this to anyone else that you ever engage with, but it's so profound. So find a comfortable seat, and let's take 3 collective breaths together. So take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. Again, inhale, exhale, breathe in, out with a huge sigh. Now I invite you to bring your hands over your heart. Just take a moment to check in and notice how you're feeling right now after those 3 collective breaths. And then whenever you feel ready, you can come off mute and just say in 1 word or 2 words how you're feeling, or you can enter it into the chat. Let's hear it.
calm,
Grounded.
Tired.
Spacious.
Beautiful.
Open.
Relaxed.
Open. Yeah.
Centered.
I feel better than I did 10 minutes ago.
Raise your hand if you do too. It makes a huge difference.
It does.
And literally all we did, we took 10 seconds at the most, and we took 3 breaths. And they were intentional, right? Because we were bringing our attention to our breath. And that in itself is life-changing. And so these practices can be used both proactively and responsively. And the proactive approach would be like, all right, I'm going to proactively develop skills and create like a routine around this practice, right? So that we increase overall well-being and we decrease reactivity and stress and all the other things, right? So proactively as an educator, I might start every single class with this. Hey, everyone, so good to see you. Let's start our class with 3 collective breaths together, right? You're building the skill. You're building the competency. You're building the strength, the connection with self. So that's the proactive approach. The responsive approach is there's a heightened stress. Something just happened. Someone just found out that a family member is very, very sick and they're devastated. Let's respond in this moment with 3 collective breaths. Let's just take a moment to honor this person and let's take 3 collective breaths together, right? That's responsive. You're literally seeing what's going on in a moment and calling on these beautiful practices to offer healing. And again, we're practicing equity here because so much of being an equity-oriented educator is knowing how to respond in a certain moment, right? It's not treating every single class exactly the same and not going off your lesson plan if something arises that needs to be addressed, right? Especially in the context of today, which can be so emotional. It's like, how do we make sure that everyone feels included and heard and seen? And oftentimes practices like 3 collective breaths or belly breathing can, when you bring them into the space, they can have that sort of healing, community oriented effect. So 3 collective breaths, draw on it. Belly breathing is another practice we do all the time. You invite your students to bring their hands to their bellies and breathe into the belly. And that can be really powerful because when we're experiencing trauma or heightened stress or chronic stress, oftentimes we're breathing simply into the chest. It's like that short, rapid breathing. We've all been there, especially this year. So when we invite people to bring their hands to their bellies and breathe in towards their belly, I like to use the language of towards instead of to, because some people are living in the chest breathing, right? They're in, states of stress that are so heightened that they actually don't necessarily know how to breathe into their belly. So we give them directional cues, breathe in towards your belly, and that can really help guide people from a state of sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight freeze, to a rest and digest parasympathetic state. So these breathing practices can be incredibly powerful. And with the little ones, when I'm doing belly breathing, bring out your bear paws. Let me put your bear paws on your big bear bellies. Inhale, fill your big bear belly with breath. Exhale, let it go. Again, fill your big bear belly. Exhale, let it go. And I'll do it a few times. Always invite the bear paws to your big bear heart. So you can modify, differentiate, get super creative about how you facilitate these practices. But in general, they really do serve as powerful tools to support your students in cultivating that self-awareness and self-management. All right, so another one of our favorite practices is the 2-word check-in. This is a perfect way to honor and accept and love and support your your students emotionally wherever they are, and to allow them to recognize that no matter how they're feeling is absolutely accepted and perfect. They don't need to fix or change how they feel. Simply bringing awareness and acceptance to that feeling is what's going to give them the space to then shift and change and heal if needed, or to amplify that feeling and to celebrate that feeling if that's where they're at. So this 2-word check-in, which we'll facilitate for you in a moment, also facilitates that self-awareness. We're bringing our attention to how we're feeling, and then we're choosing 2 words that describe how we're feeling right now. Just like I had you choose a word to represent your intention, this specifically is about our feelings. So we're choosing 2 words that describe how we're feeling. And then we're inviting in some capacity, and this is going to look different whether you're teaching in person, you're digital, how old your students are. You're going to invite your students to share out how do they feel. Now, when we're leading trainings of hundreds of people, we can still hold space and be inclusive of every single person, because we'll invite them to share it in the chat and everyone can see it. And I'll repeat back, I see that you're feeling this and this and this, and I'll honor exactly how everyone feels. If it's in person or if I have a small group of people digitally, I'll always open up space for everyone to go around, and if they feel comfortable, to share their 2 words. When we lead in-person trainings for 100 people might be in a room, and it takes about 2 or 3 minutes to get through every single person's share, because all they're doing is saying 2 words, and it is pin drop powerful. And as an educator, you know exactly where your students are and how to respond with your teaching in an effective way, based on whether your students in general are feeling excited, inspired, happy, joyful, versus like devastated, sad, or frustrated, overwhelmed, stressed. Like what you do after that 2-word check-in is going to be different if you're being an equity oriented educator. So Brie, I invite you to add anything you want, and also let's do the 2-word check-in.
Yeah. I also wanted to add that your students will need different supports throughout these process, right? So Ilana already hinted that some of this needs proactive teaching. Some students might need a little longer with the tool and a little bit more practice so that they can access it. I know that oftentimes that when we see students in a panic zone, that we oftentimes ask them to call on tools. That is actually doing more harm if we haven't set them up for success, right? So like if I'm like, go do your 3 breaths when they're like upset, right? Like that is now a punitive form of something, right? Whereas the different approaches, I've been supporting my class by every time we transition in, we do 3 collective breaths. The student has shared out that after the 3 collective breaths, they feel calmer. So I've coached them into, this is a tool that you can utilize because we've done the 2-word check-in, because it makes you feel calmer and more present. So now when they're in crises or end up in the panic zone, I go to them and say, what's one of your tools that makes you feel calmer and more present, right? The student has advocated and said that this is a tool that works for them. So there might be different things that you need to coach them into. Some of them are beautiful, I've seen in the chat. Think about the pictures that they've drawn. Think about the different things that they have said, right? That we can support them into accessing what that feeling is inside of their body. That's the self-awareness, that's the self-management, and that's how we can end up checking in with them and supporting them. And then sometimes it's okay to allow, we have to allow all feelings in the space, and not necessarily we name them in the space, but we don't respond to them and highlight things as good or bad. It's non-judgmental, right? Because all of your emotions are just information. They're letting you know where you're at on that day, right? So if I'm scared and I just saw a scary movie, right? Like that's okay. And that's an okay information. Like maybe I shouldn't watch movies before midnight, before I go to bed, right? Like that's information for me to take in. Or like if I'm angry, maybe it's okay in that moment, and like anger is not a bad emotion. It just lets me know something's going on with myself. And perhaps as the class goes on, right, because I was a middle child, I oftentimes went to school angry. But by the time I got through first period, it was okay. And it's not that you need to necessarily, if you know your students in your community, right, like you can know where they're at sometimes. I had a student that came in angry always, but I also had a box of Nutri-Grain bars. And by 15 minutes later, it wasn't a problem anymore. But that's knowing your students and understanding where they're at. And that's why the two-word check-in really can be this really equitable practice that we can begin to learn our students and how they come in daily. Like, is this a daily thing? And end up really understanding them greatly. So, Ilana.
All right. So I saw some really interesting questions in the chat around if you're doing this with older students, to expand the number of words. So we intentionally, no matter how old you are, you're 2, you're 70, 2 words. You do not need more words because it is a skill, no matter what your vocabulary is, to hone in and really center on, how do I feel right now? One word doesn't necessarily add the level of complexity and nuance that 2 words does. I'm feeling grateful, but grateful and empowered is like that, kind of like has a completion. When we're having 5 words, 10 words, then it's like we're going into story and there's a lot more. It's not, no, let's center. So it's called the 2-word check-in. I've never called it the 4-word check-in. I've never called it the 9-word check-in because of age. That's 2 for very intentional purpose. But what's beautiful about it is, as your students get older, they are going to use more nuanced language, right? If I'm in high school, I'm definitely going to be using different words than I am if I'm 4 years old. And when we ask our students at the end, hey, share it in the chat, share it with each other, I may hear a word that's new to me. And then it adds it to my emotional toolkit, right? So you're still building your students' vocabulary, no matter how old, by that sharing component at the end. And it is such a, you could always do activities at the beginning of the school year or whenever, when you're introducing this, like, hey, what are some words of how we feel? You can take pictures of your students' faces, like if you're the young ones, especially. All right, what do we look like when we're sad? Okay, sad. And then write sad and have a wall in your peace corner that has all these emotions. So like you're building emotional vocabulary. As someone says a new word, you can add that word onto the list. So like there's a lot of different ways to use this as a literacy tool as well. And so this can be something that you use before, at the very beginning of a class. So I want to know how my students are when they're walking in. It could be after a learning experience, especially a profound, like deep learning experience, so you know how people responded to it. Or it could be at the very end of the school day when you're like, all right, let's check in and see how we're doing before we check out, right? So let me just demonstrate for you what this is like. So now that we're closing in on our time together, I invite you to find a comfortable seat. Bring your hands over your heart, since that's where our emotions live, right there in your heart. Take a deep breath in, deep breath out. I invite you to just take a moment after we've spent these 50 minutes together, learning, growing, just noticing, how do you feel right now? And I invite you to pick 2 words that describe how you're feeling right now. When you have those 2 words, if your eyes are closed, you can gently open them. I would love for you to put your 2 words into the chat so you can see what's in the space. Inspired, thankful, calm, peaceful, informed, gratitude, hopeful, excited, calm, tired, ready, elated, free, empowered, informed, refreshed. So beautiful, everybody. Absolutely amazing. So you can see like, wow, we just had a really amazing experience by that. Like that captivates the emotion, the collective emotion. And it is absolutely important when we're facilitating. You saw, I'm reading back to you, naming. When we're in the digital space, that's a way to bring it alive. When you're in person, they're saying their own emotions. Or I could have taken you off mute. If I was in a smaller group, I'd have everyone, I'd call on each person and have them come off mute and say it. The fact that we have over 100 people, that might take a while. So I'm choosing to be inclusive by letting every single one of you share your emotions in the chat. And then all of us have the power to see that, right? So there's a lot of different ways that we're inviting in equity into the space, inclusion into the space, by thinking about how do we create containers for everyone to be involved and for us to see and feel one another. So thank you all so much for diving in with us. I hope that this gave you some very tangible tools that you can integrate into your teaching, that you can use literally tomorrow, that you could use with your family over the dinner table, like all the things, or over Zoom if you're having meals on Zoom because of social distancing. And as we had mentioned, for those of you who are new to Breathe for Change, which is about 50% of you, this was just a tiny taste of what we do in our 200-hour wellness, SEL, and yoga teacher training. So through that training, you become certified in two ways. You become a Breathe for Change social emotional learning facilitator. So if you learn like, a handful of practices, you are going to learn hundreds in our training, and then understand how to weave all these practices together to facilitate wellness workshops, professional development, really be a leader in your school, district, or organization around these equity-oriented SEL and wellness practices. And how do we really enhance student and educator and just human well-being? So that's one component of our training. And the other is you become an internationally recognized certified yoga teacher. So you'll learn how to teach inclusive and trauma-informed yoga classes to both adults and young people. And many educators come to this training. They're like, I'm like, I know SEL, like I love it, I want more, but they're like, I'm new to yoga. Absolutely fine. The whole approach we take is inclusive and trauma-informed. And so you'll learn to deepen your yoga practice, no matter where you're at, whether you've taught or you've practiced for 30 years or you're new to the practice, but you'll also learn the skills to be able to share these healing tools and modalities, and relating to so many different people with different desires and needs and strengths and wants. And so it's so important that we take these tools and make them our own. So we're inviting you to do that. Go play, have so much fun with it. Come report back. We lead these webinars or similar webinars on different topics, whether it's related to yoga or SEL or mindfulness or meditation or trauma-informed practice, every single week. And so you can be on our newsletter and get access to that. You can look at on our resource page and at our website. I also lead yoga classes, or one of our lead trainers leads yoga classes every Monday at 4 Pacific time, 7 Eastern, if you want to join a bunch of educators and leaders who just want to breathe together and move together. That's another beautiful way to be involved. And then, of course, our trainings are our favorite. So I hope to see many of you in our training, and I can't wait to welcome those of you who are starting on Saturday, or those of you who are thinking about starting on Saturday after today. So come on off mute and say goodbye to everybody. Thank you all so much for being here.